he was at some point famous because he would do double new oak barrel, no? And so that is sort of, in a way, would almost feel like the opposite to what the Contrada could be, no? But at the same time, he was also the one who decided to do the Cabernet Cruise.
This was Benjamin Franchetti talking about his father Andrea Franchetti, the founder of Passopisciaro and Tenuta di Trinoro. More specifically, he reminds us of his father's experimental and visionary spirit that greatly contributed to the quality improvement in two prime growing regions of Italy, Tuscany and Sicily. In the following 2 episodes, you can listen to the stories and ideas behind these revolutionary ventures from Benjamin. In this first conversation, the focus is on the development of the legendary estate, on the beginnings of making prime wine on the Etna, and how the Contradas system developed there. You will also hear of Nerello Mascalese, the flagship grape variety on this beautiful volcano and its adapting capabilities to the different conditions and altitudes. You also get to hear Benjamin's thoughts on where the future of the region might go, and of course, as always, much more. Please leave a comment with your question or notes on Instagram under the episode's post and rate the Wine Goes podcast on the hosting platform of your choice. To help other like-minded wine freaks like you and me find the show in the great sea of wine podcasts. Thank you and enjoy. I think your father, Andrea, was a legendary figure in the Italian wine world. So what kind of man was your father? How do you remember him? What do you think, what did make him this legendary figure in the Italian wine world?
He was a person which, I would say, most of all, he never did what other people expected him to do. So in a way, he would always do whatever. So he was in a way a visionary. So he had an idea of something he wanted to do for himself, like what he thought was the right thing to do, what was the right thing to do for that specific project he had, and he would pursue it no matter what. So in a way, he was someone that would think a lot outside of the box, would do things which were I would say unconventional is the right word. I mean, to the point where, for example, like in the very last years of his life, maybe last couple of years, he wanted to make wine in a property he had in Sardinia, and he didn't have the authorization to plant anything there, so he asked for authorization, and they said no, and he went over and planted anyways. And then, of course, then the forestry arrived and closed everything and said, "I'm sorry, you cannot do it. This is illegal." And then actually I found myself to having to deal with all the issues this created. But just to give you a bit of an idea of, like, if he wanted to do something, he would do it, and he would do everything to be able to get it done.
Mm. And maybe 2 other good examples would be his opening of or planting vineyards in the southern Tuscany where no vines were planted before, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to Trinoro, Tenuta di Trinoro, where which essentially was where he started his winemaking career in the late 1980s, mid-late 1980s, he went into this valley, especially at the time when really winemaking in Italy was in a stage which was undergoing a lot of transition. And he, rather than doing, I guess, what most people would have done, which was find a plot of land in the traditional winemaking areas. We have Montalcino, which is like less than an hour drive away. And at the time, it's not like the prices were crazy like today. He went into Valdorcia. He in a specific area of Valdorcia, which is on the south side of Valdorcia. So exactly on the opposite side where you would find Montalcino. And he decided to plant there in the middle of nowhere. Like, when he, at the time, the farmers thought he was completely crazy. The only thing you would find in Valdorcia were potatoes and sheep. And like actually, like I was speaking with not too long ago with someone who is traditionally from the town nearby, and he said that when he was young, he was almost scared to go inside Valdorcia because it was like this valley, this almost scary valley, which is crazy to think about it today because it's such a beautiful place. But absolutely, he was in love with Bordeaux. He loved the Bordeaux varieties, and he wanted to make a Bordeaux blend. And he wanted to make a Bordeaux blend in a place he found astonishingly beautiful, and he did it, and the wine came out well.
And the other example would be maybe also Etna, because the first time he set foot on these islands, I think it was in 2000. Do you have maybe any memory, or were you maybe with him in 2000, or how did this place look like then?
Well, I mean, so now we're speaking of 25 years ago. I was, like a young teenager at the time. I remember quite clearly when he was looking for a second project. I remember at the beginning, he had even looked at Calabria as an option. And then he ended up onto Mount Etna. I mean, in hindsight, it seems like not such a strange choice, because ultimately you had this incredible territory with 100+ years old vines, perfectly in a perfect state at incredibly good prices per hectare. You know, you could get a hectare for less than 10,000 euros, a planted hectare. You know, now it's like 200,000. You know, it's so in hindsight it doesn't seem so strange, but absolutely it's easy to say once the project once the Etna has become what it has become. Like now there's more than 150 producers, and you know, it's one of the most successful wine regions of Italy. But yeah, I would definitely say he had, in this case, I would say it's somewhat different, because rather than doing something out of the ordinary, he had a vision he was a precursor to something which was gonna come.
Mm-hmm. Because he was one of the first on the island to start a quality winery there, right?
So not on the island, I would say on the
Etna.
On the Etna, yeah. So Sicily has always been a major wine making region, but Etna was still, you know, a winemaking area. But at the time, the winemaking was primarily quantity rather than quality, and there were some established winemakers like Benanti there already, but absolutely, I mean, he's very well recognized as one of the first 2 or 3 people to have arrived on the mountain to start wine.
Because I also visited the winery not long ago, and now it's a bit more infrastructure there, but I would imagine that at the time, 25 years ago, it was more like an abandoned place, and the winery was also abandoned, if I remember correctly. It was since the last eruption, since 47, it was basically in ruins. So, and one of the few things that was left is actually the stone staircase, which leads to the cellar. So, do you remember maybe this place in the ruins and how much struggle it was?
I mean, absolutely. Not only the winery, but also everything around it. I mean, the vines all around it were essentially abandoned. I mean, the Guardiola vineyard, which comprises like 30-40% of our vineyards, was completely abandoned, and everything around it. Like now, you go there and it's this sea of vines flowing down, and with multiple winemakers around us.
And the winery is basically located in the Guardiola Contrada, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's in the Guardiola Contrada. So all the vines start to develop upwards behind the winery, and and there we essentially have the Nerello Mascalese, of course, which is the main red wine made made on the northern side of Mount Etna, and then we've my father planted so many things there. Tried, that's again so typical of him, was to really try a lot of things. He would he really did a lot of trial and error. So he had an idea, and then he would try something, and if it didn't work, he would be like, okay, didn't work, I'll try something again. And so, for example, we have planted there Viognier, which we've never even bottled, and but he planted Cesanese and Petit Verdot. In addition, which are all planted around the winery. Just next to the winery, there, a small 1 hectare vineyard of Petit Verdot.
But this turned out well for the winery, right? Because Petit Verdot is the very core of the top wine of the winery, the Franchetti.
Yeah, so this is a bit of an interesting story. So, I mean, top wine is I don't think when Franchetti was made the first time, the objective was to make a top wine, and I don't know if today we perceive the Franchetti as the top wine of the winery. I mean, like, to avoid, wine, like, for example, in Tenuta di Trinoro, it's very obvious Tenuta di Trinoro is our first wine. And it's, Franchetti is something in a way very unique. It's completely unrelated to everything else we make there. Like, the vast majority of the wine made on our estate is on the one side Nerello Mascalese, and on the other side Chardonnay for the Passo Bianco. The Franchetti, in my opinion, was started a bit as I wouldn't say experiment, but as a curiosity. What drove it was, I think, primarily was the Cesanese. So for who doesn't know, Franchetti is a blend of Cesanese and Petit Verdot. It's an extremely unique blend. Cesanese is a wine variety from the Lazio region, so the region especially around Rome. And our family, the Franchetti family, is a family which is from Rome. My father grew up and lived in Rome. I grew up in Rome. My grandfather was from Rome, so we are a Roman family. And I think initially it was a bit a homage maybe to a Roman side. But initially, Cesanese was planted in Tenuta di Trinoro, and maybe someone who listens to this will remember this wine, which was called Cincinnato, which my father released, which was 100% Cesanese, made in Tenuta di Trinoro. The reality is that actually Cesanese came out very badly in Tuscany for a very simple reason. That where our property in Tuscany is primarily based on clay, and the Cesanese is a grape that needs a volcanic soil. In fact, the area around Rome is volcanic. So when he went to the Etna, he decided to plant there Cesanese, and of course it came out very well. On the other hand, I think the idea of blending it with Petit Verdot really, in my opinion, came primarily from his desire to ultimately keep on doing what he loved, which was some sort of Bordeaux-based wine. He always really loved Petit Verdot a lot. I really remember he always wanted to make Petit Verdot alone. But the Petit Verdot in Tuscany was never as great, I think, as the Petit Verdot. We sometimes joke, when we're doing the blend of Tenuta di Trinoro, we sometimes joke, it wouldn't be nice to have some of that Petit Verdot of the Etna, you know. For some reason, it just came out extraordinarily well on the Etna. And this blend of Cesanese and Petit Verdot is something so unique that my father decided to give it the name Franchetti.
We already talked a little bit about Guardiola, but the most benchmark wines that you make on this volcano is actually the Nerello Mascalese Contradas and all those differences that you always work on. What is actually now the momentum and dynamic on Etna? I think it's kind of following in the footsteps of, as Barolo did earlier, in the footsteps of Burgundy, but then I think the Gran Selezione and the Chianti Classico is also maybe moving into this direction that just kind of the microclimates should speak in the wine and not the wood and the alcohol and not maybe the winemaker. Do you think that this dynamic or this momentum is the main feature of your winery and this is what you may be most proud of?
I think the way you put it is absolutely correct. It's actually interesting that you are describing it this way, because if you think of a bit the figure of my father, especially in the late 90s and early 2000s, was, for example, he was at some point famous because he would do double new oak barrel, no? And so that is sort of, in a way, would almost feel like the opposite to what the Contrada could be, no? But at the same time, he was also the one who decided to do the Cabernet Cruz. I'm sorry, I sometimes just speak about Trinora because, it's a good way to mix the argument. But instead, this shows that is not true. He really, really believed a lot in the terroir. He really believed a lot on the quality of the wine, given a specific terroir and climate. And the idea of Contrada was an idea that he really developed. He started this event called Le Contrade dell'Etna, which is an event that today is a very successful wine event that attracts thousands of people to the Etna. I was there a couple of weeks ago and there were more than 150 producers. And at the time, I have such a clear memory of the first Contrade dell'Etna, which he organized in the winery, in our winery. And there was it was a very casual gathering between essentially friends. And maybe there was just over 10 different wineries. And the idea at the time, which unfortunately has been lost, was that it was more of like an en primeur. So the idea there was that the different wine producers would bring all the wines from the different vineyards and taste the current annata. So today we would be tasting the 2023, and together just try to see how much the taste of the wine would vary in these different crus, which are essentially the different contradas. So it was this to the next level. It was, let's taste the vines of the different crus, of the different contradas, even before we start doing, before we start doing the blend, before we start bottling. And I think it's by doing this that he and now a lot of people realize that actually, wow, this is what makes the Etna really special. It's more than anything else, it's how much the territory has an effect on the vine, the grapes, the vines and the grapes and the final wine, which in a way is not surprising. I mean, we are speaking about a volcano. Etna is the tallest volcano in Europe. It's more than 3,000 meters tall. I always need to remind people that when we're speaking about the Etna and we're speaking about the wine made on the Etna, we're speaking about a mountain region. We're not speaking about Sicily. We're speaking about a mountain region. It's not as Mediterranean as other parts of Sicily. And so first and foremost, it's a volcano. And, a volcano means that essentially the soil comes from what the volcano digs from the core of the earth and throws back to the surface. And inevitably, this means that the soil can vary quite a lot depending on where you are. And this is so obvious when you go on the app. We have 5 different contradas. And you go in Guardiola, for example, which is, as we've discussed, which is the contrada next to the winery, and there the soil is very sandy because it comes from a pyroclastic eruption. A pyroclastic eruption is an explosion of ash, essentially, and this is ash which has deposited, and over thousands of years, it has created the soil of Guardiola. Elsewhere, you go to Sciara Nuova, which, as the name itself says, new Sciara, which means a new lava flow, which is a flow from the 1600, which means that it not only has a completely different geological age, thousands of years in difference. It has a completely different kind of soil, a completely different minerality. And in addition to that, we need to think about the climate, because ultimately what affects the vine is the soil and the climate on top of it. And here we're speaking about, as discussed, a mountain where the vineyards vary in altitude from 500 meters, like Chiappemacine, all the way to Rampante, in our case, of course, which is at 1,000 meters. And you can imagine that even now, even in May, actually I was there, as discussed a few weeks ago, for the chat 2 weeks ago for Contrada. And at 1,000 meters, there is the snow. And at 500 meters, there is, you're in a t-shirt.
When I started to learn about Etna, me living in the northern region, so living in Austria, of course, these wineries and these farmers were looking for the southern exposure. Because in the past, when global warming was not that intense, you obviously needed ripeness and sugar levels. Now it's almost like kind of the opposite, also here in Austria. But what was really surprising to me when I arrived there, that I think Maria is the name of the lady who works there, but I forget her name. Sorry, but
maybe Maria Giovanna.
Yes.
Giovanna was.
Yes, exactly. And she explained that in the summer the temperatures can exceed 50 degrees, even at that high altitude. And this is on the northern side of the Etna, and that was so surprising to me. But on the other hand, on the same day, you can have like 13 degrees at night. So it's more than crazy what kind of temperature differences you have in the day, and that also explains obviously the sugar levels, and you don't have any green flavors or unripeness in any of your wines, but quite high alcohol, not full-bodied, so it doesn't feel too heavy, but I think it's also a characteristic of Nerello Mascalese, but also a very refreshing acidity. So I think these attributes give just a very unique, not only flavor profile, but also characteristic to the wine. Do you think that Nerello Mascalese is one of the best grapes to kind of channel this attributes or channel this kind of contradas?
I don't know if it's the best, but I definitely think it does it well. I think what you said is all very correct. I mean, the Etna is a place of extremes, as you said. You have very cold at night, but it can be probably not 50 degrees during the day, but but it can, it definitely can reach very high temperatures. There's a very strong sunlight. I mean, you can really feel the sun when you're there. And so to essentially answer your question, the plants are more than 100. No, not to answer, to like add to your comment. The plants are there for more than 100 years, and when the farmers decided to plant on the northern side, the whole discussions on climate change wasn't even there. And in fact, something which I find really interesting and beautiful is that if you start walking above where we are, and you go not only to 1,000, but to 1,100, 1,200, you still find abandoned vines. You go to 1,200 meters and there's abandoned vineyards, abandoned wineries, still with the old large oak barrels completely abandoned there. And you're thinking this is places where people would grow vines 50, 60 years ago. So it made sense at the time, and it feels it's also a protection towards climate change, because we know that as things are going to get hotter, we can always go higher in altitude. I guess the only ones who don't seem to really understand it is the people who do the dock, which think that you need to go more down rather than up. But other than that, so yeah, you're saying then you were speaking about whether Nerello Mascalese is the right wine to act as a vehicle for the different contradas and to absorb that territory. Look, it's a question which for me is a bit hard to reply. First of all, because Nerello Mascalese is a wine that, for whichever reason, you pretty much only find it on the Etna. I mean, people are growing it elsewhere in Sicily. I spoke with some people which are growing it in California or even in Australia. But generally speaking, it's very characteristic of the Etna. So how it behaves elsewhere, it's hard to understand. How other wines behave on the Etna, we are starting to get more knowledge, but I would say it's very, very recent, and I'll get to that. In the meantime, I find that Nerello Mascalese to have a lot of what you're saying. Essentially, I love the acidity, the fact that it retains its freshness, this acidity, while also maintaining a good element of structure. For me, what makes Nerello Mascalese a very, very interesting wine. And it's, I guess, also particularly absorbing of the territory, of the volcanic territory, because whenever you have the opportunity to try the contradas next to each other, everyone remains stunned by how much they change just based on soil. It's a wine where I think a lot of work is still being done. I think first and foremost on its aging potential. I think it's something that I'm seeing more and more being asked, and I'm doing more and more wine events where we're trying how the wine has changed in the last 10 or 15 years, and it does. It has aging potential, but it's also true that it's a lot of a hit and miss. Realistically, like I will open one bottle of 2010 is good and one will be not good. I cannot say that of a Cabernet Franc. It's like always good. So and the reason for that is definitely Nerello. On the one hand, maybe it's not a grape that has so much aging potential, but it's also true that it's only been 20, 25 years that we are really learning how to do great Nerello Mascalese. Because before it was all about quantity, and now it's about quality. And so it's over the years we've become better and better at making this wine and thinking about how to make this wine age.
Mm.
However, it is also true that there's different ways of making Nerello Mascalese. So I continue the tradition of my father, that I believe that wines needs to reach their phenolic maturity. So for me, it's important that the complexity and the structure of Nerello Mascalese comes to fulfillment. Of course, you don't have to exaggerate. You don't want something that then becomes too alcoholic. But I think whenever you try the Passopisciaro wines, you will find that they are more structured, a bit more complex, maybe than other wines. Primarily, one of the main reasons is that we just harvest later.
Yeah.
We are typically the last to harvest on the Etna, and this means that the grapes had more time to extract phenolics, and this higher alcohol, higher structure of Nerello Mascalese. I think you will find it especially in our wines compared to other wines.
Yeah. I was asked this because maybe to close on this line of thought what I already kind of outlined with this revolution of Burgundy. They had the one characteristic grape with Pinot Noir, and then maybe Barolo with Nebbiolo, and then maybe Sangiovese with the Gran Selezione. I think it was very important what you mentioned with the aging potential, because obviously that's one of the most sought after character of a wine, especially if it's high priced and maybe later on as an investment product. It's very interesting. The last two episodes was somehow kind of related to this one. I talked in the last episode with Castello di Ama, and also they were very important, obviously, for the Gran Selezione, and they have very high priced single vineyard Sangioveses. But also in the episode before,
I know them well because I drink them often.
Nice. Good for you. And I also talked
often, I mean somewhat often, but I like them a lot. Yeah.
And before that, I talked to an investment company or an investment advisor out of Denmark, and he tried your wines very recently, I think in January. And we were talking a little bit about Etna and what makes a wine a good investment and what not. And obviously one of the most important characteristics, not only the character, that it's maybe even recognizable in the blind tasting, but also its aging potential. So I'm very curious to see how this Etna single vineyard system goes, and it's obviously one of the most important elements that you produce wines. Not only you personally, but you produce wines on the Etna with other producers. Like I don't want to mention other ones, but you produce wines that are long lived. So what's your take on that? Do you think that this dynamic is going in this direction, or?
So it's something that we've been thinking a lot about, and I think it's sort of going in this direction, but also the opposite direction. So definitely there is a lot of the fact that Etna Rosso has become, I guess, like Chianti, just Chianti, has become a very recognized logo. Let's call it like that. No? That this means that a lot of winemakers, they are like, they want to maybe do just Etna Rosso, and they're like, this is something the customer will immediately notice, and they will be immediately attracted to it, and so people will make wine in the Etna DOC regardless of really trying to do something very high quality. Like, I'm seeing vineyards being planted in a new lava flows of the 19, which it's you can't, but they don't care because we're inside the dock. So I'm a bit going in the other direction, but this is something I'm seeing a lot. On the other hand, I've seen an explosion of Contradas, which is in a way a good thing. the thing where I think Etna, being a relatively new place, needs to create a bit of become a bit more organized. So right now, while in Barolo, Barbaresco, you have so well defined crews like Rabaha, Montestefano. Wine lovers of the region really know what they're going to drink. I think this is still developing on the Etna, but it's also being made more complicated because some contradas are inside the Etna dock, some are not. If they're not, you cannot name them. So, for example, our 5 contradas, some are in the dock, some are outside, but to avoid creating confusion, we give them just the first letter. So it's not Contrada Guardiola, it's Contrada G. It's not Contrada Charanuova, it's Contrada S. And I think all of these things are making it a bit more complicated to create very established contradas, even because a contrada might be half in the dock, half outside. And then, also when, and this is something I speak about quite a lot with my father and the director at Passopisciaro, which is Vincenzo, which is, when they first started calling the contradas contrada, the names they were using were based on, the local names that the local farmer would use, no? Like he would say, yeah, there, go to Rampante, no? And then it was so new that nothing was really established. And so now that all of a sudden it became a lot more important, then now they're trying to define everything. But so all of a sudden something that the local farmer would call rampante, it's actually not really rampante, but it's slightly another one. So I think there we need to become a bit better at creating a bit more of order in this world of contradas, to start to really understand better what is Guardiola, what is Feudo di Mezzo, what is Rampante, what is Arcuria, and what is San Lorenzo, and I think this is something which has just started.
So what are for you the differences? Because I think it's one of the most evil questions what you can ask of a winemaker. What is this different wine of the portfolio? It's like, which one is your favorite child, right? But how would you maybe define the Nerellos? Or what would be maybe for you that it's closer to your heart, and why?
So I think the first thing that really changes when you're drinking them, I like to, so for example, this is something that I do differently than my father. My father would drink them based on structure. I like to drink them based on altitude. It's my engineering background, I don't know, but so I tend to start from the lowest altitude contrada, which is Chiappemacine, and then to have move all the way up to Rampante. And to me, the first real difference is, when does it become a mountain wine? So when do we go from continental to mountain? And this, I think, is very, very clear. Chiappemacine is clearly a continental wine. So much that even though it's at a lower altitude, so you would imagine it having a lot more structure, it doesn't, no? Because it's hot. Just for that, it doesn't, because the soil is not as volcanic anymore. Somewhat there's a lot more sandstone inside it. So for me, the first difference is that when do we stop being a continental wine and when do we become a mountain wine? So as you go up, already Porcheria, but after Porcheria. So I really think the difference, you start to feel it in Charanuova, Guardiola, and Rampante. You see this transition. All of a sudden, the wines become more vertical, and you perceive that, okay, now we are in Alto Adige all of a sudden. We are not in Sicily anymore. And so that is something. And then it's the kind of soil, as I said before. To me, that is such a fundamental change. When you're in Guardiola, just dig your hands inside and you take away this sand, no? And this clearly shows how the roots can go deep down. And by going deep down, I think I always find Guardiola such a fresh contrada, or such a more, in a way, it has a lot of floral characteristics. In a way, almost more aromatic. While Rampante, it's quite in a good way, no? In a good way, it's a very rough contrada. It's more tends to have higher tannins. You're now at a much higher altitude. You're close to 1,000 meters, but also the soil is very rocky. It's very volcanic, and so the roots inevitably struggle a bit more. Finally, Sciara Nuova is sort of the, I guess, as you said, it's maybe the favorite baby a bit. For me, it's hard to say. I mean, I tend to find myself drinking Guardiola very often for whatever reason. But Sciara Nuova is, it's the one that tends to, for many people, to have found that perfect balance, that perfect equilibrium. And in a way, it's maybe the one that is a bit more elegant, a bit more of a great wine, kind of Nerello. Yeah, but this is of Nerello Mascalese, of course. And then we have the world of Chardonnay, which is another one in itself.
Yeah, sure. But to be honest, when I first, obviously, we tried the Chardonnay, the Passo Bianco, and I was almost, to be honest, afraid to try the Chardonnay, because when I heard about the temperature and the climate, like, what am I going to drink? Like this kind of exotic acidity lacking something. But it was more than refreshing and very elegant. I wouldn't put it basically to any other classic Chardonnay region. I wouldn't even make any comparison. It was a very unique one and surprisingly lively and I would say almost vertical.
I mean, I'm very glad you said it. Do you remember which year you drank? 22?
I think 21.
21. So if you get the opportunity to try 22, you're going to have this even more. I think this is very much a mixture of two things. So first of all, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I find Chardonnay to be quite a chameleontic grape. I think it really absorbs the terroir a lot. But I think the way the Chardonnay we make has evolved, I think has changed. I think initially my father wanted to really do a Burgundy style Chardonnay. I think that was his objective, and I think that objective was somewhat, I wouldn't say wrong, but I would say was, I like now over the years, looking back and looking at the wine now, in my opinion, the great thing of Passo Bianco is that it's, and of the Pazzo Chianti, which is our crew do, is the fact that it's so unique. Every time I was in the US last week, and the US are used to like Napa Chardonnays, and they're like, wow, like no one would ever say it's a Chardonnay. Why? Because of what you say. It's vertical, it's refreshing, it's vibrant. And this is all the Etna. The Chardonnay we've planted is at 1,000 meters. So 1,000 meters, some say it's the highest altitude Chardonnay in Italy. So all of a sudden, yes, we're in Sicily, but we are at 1,000 meters. And so the Chardonnay, in my opinion, the great thing about Passo Bianco is really this, what I think is this verticality, this drinkability, while still being an elegant Chardonnay. So I'm glad you thought that.
Cool. So what do you have any maybe new visions or objectives for this place or for this plan?
So we've, like when I took over like more officially since 2020, the estate, I really went through quite a lot of investments. I think it was for a few years. It didn't proceed the investment pace as much as the estate needed. And the first thing that together with the director Vincenzo we did was to extend the winery. So now we've added another 600 square meters of structure to it, which is going to help us essentially to make it more everything more workable. So this together with we've invested in completely new machinery, new large oak and barrels. We've made more than $1.5 million investment in the last 2 years, so which for a estate our size is quite substantial. So this is really the main changes we've done. We've done a little bit, added a bit new vineyards, not a lot, but we are identifying areas where we think we can make really good wine. This is still somewhat top secret, but we are looking at a new label to come out in maybe next year, but at the moment I cannot say anything more.
No one is listening.
No, but there is a very, very, very fun project, which I think is gonna really make a lot of people excited, especially you that you're Austrians like you will understand this kind of wine especially well, in my opinion. That's it.
Wow, cool. I hope it's not Grüner Veltliner.
No, it's not Grüner Veltliner. It's not Veltliner.
I hope you liked this episode with Benjamin, and please listen to the next one about Tenuta di Trinoro and about a real Tuscan estate and about his philosophy and maybe future aspirations. Thank you.